We would strongly encourage all of you to stay here. And of course, for those of you outside who could hear, please join us inside because we're talking about something very close to our heart, the future workplace or the workplace of tomorrow. So before we begin, we're going to go through a quick introduction. We have a huge, great panelist today from Facebook. We have Lab Campus, we have Steelcase, we also have Acton VC here. So, and myself, I'm just going to give a quick introduction. I'm from TechNode. We're a Chinese tech media company, and we focus a lot on the ecosystem in China, the innovation, the startup scene. And I'm just going to leave it there, and let's go down the panel here. Maybe Mark, you can start first.
Hi, I'm also happy to be here. I'm from Lab Campus. Lab Campus is a new innovation campus directly located at Munich Airport, and we want to build up the space for people and companies to come together, to collaborate, and to work together on the challenges of tomorrow.
Hi, my name is Maria Burke. I'm the Communications Director for Steelcase Asia Pacific. Steelcase is the #1 global provider of furniture solutions and workplace solutions in the world.
Braun. I'm one of the partners at Acton Capital Partners. We're a VC growth firm based in Munich and do investments so far in Europe and North America, and we're looking at Southeast Asia.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Runham. I look after Facebook HR for Asia, and I'm not going to introduce Facebook.
Great. We all know Facebook. And the thing is, today I think we got a good panel here discussing about the workplace of tomorrow. We're going to start off with some very simple question here. What is one of the most interesting, future workplace that you guys have seen out there? And just before we start off here, we just want to discuss. We were having a good conversation outside earlier before this panel here, and there's a lot of things that we want to share today. It could go all the way to education, to like designing a physical workplace. But what is one of the most interesting workplace you have came across or you've seen so far currently? Anyone from down the line? You could start off.
Maybe I'll kick off because it's kind of my area.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any one particular space or like we work with leading organizations, Steelcase, but in my time with Steelcase, I visited quite a number of spaces, but I think some places are getting it right, some places are trying new things, so I feel that there's lots of innovation around space and learnings. Is there one particular leader? I can't really name that at the moment, but I do think that there's very interesting ideas around how organizations are creating very strong cultures in their spaces, how they're actually looking to empowering the employees to actually create spaces that have personalization around their needs. So that's, for me, is quite a strong trend that I see at the moment.
So is Facebook one of your clients? Do you design
yes,
for
I
Facebook?
think so.
Do you think that, have you been to Facebook? How many of you have been to Facebook's office here? Yeah, so Facebook, yes, of course. We have Lizzie here. Can you tell us about, like, what do you think of your workplace? Do you think it's the best?
Well, I'm not going to say no, but we're constantly learning. I think what's interesting about the way that we're designed, and we work with Maria's firm and so on, is we're very informal, but we're not very casual. So we're very informal, everyone can wear their sneakers. We don't actually have a dress code. So there is no dress code whatsoever. You can turn up in a ball gown, and people do. But we're not very casual. So we think about absolutely everything and every decision, every workplace layout. And we were talking just now about, we have a system which some of you might have where it's an electronic room booking system because everyone's in open plan, no one has an office, including Mark. And so when you want to book a room, there's a screen outside the door. You can go in and you can book. And as the meeting is coming to an end, you get an amber flashing light inside the room that tells you the meeting's coming to an end. And outside the door, the next person can check in. And it sends a little ping, an audio ping, to the people inside the room to let them know that they're there. And I'd never worked in an environment, and I've worked in consulting, I've worked in startups, I've worked in health tech, banking. I'd never worked in an environment where a junior person can happily and comfortably kick a senior person out of a room.
That is nice.
Especially in Asia. Like we would often sit and
It would be
wait
very
for
weird.
the person to finish their meeting, or you just go and find another room. But we absolutely don't do that. And so the democratic spirit of the workplace is really thought about through the workplace design.
So that is very normal. You're saying that for a junior guy to kick someone out, a senior person out of the meeting room. So does that happen with meetings that you have? Like Christoph, you're also previously from consulting, right?
Yeah, I remember back in the days working for a consulting company where it was very clear who was sitting where, and I told you the story it was very clear for if somebody was coming closer to the window, what his hierarchical position or his tenure was. I think if I may go back to your question, what's interesting, I think there is a connotation. It's not just about design and kind of the equipment that's out there, but also kind of how organizations behave, right? We had a company, or we have a company in our portfolio in Canada. What they do is that every 2 Fridays you have to sit on a totally. They still have fixed workspaces assigned to them, but you have to sit in a different workspace every 2 weeks. And you cannot repeat where have you been sitting 2 weeks ago. So what that means is that you create connections between people, and they start talking about, so what are you actually doing? You're in sales, I'm in marketing. I think the new workplace, I think, has huge requirements on the organization side of things. Because you have to be, as a leader, you have to be very specific of what the goals are, where you want to go with something, and then you also have to be very clear about the feedback loops that you're having. So I think all the openness in space,
it's a combination of
is
like
wonderful,
physical design.
but you also have to take the measures to really make and keep organizations efficient.
Yeah, it's a good point you brought out there in terms of like internally you need lots of collaboration, and this, especially when we progress in terms of work. In the past, it's very hierarchical, right? You have your top-down structure, but these days it's very flat. We have Facebook. Everyone. You could kick your boss out of the meeting room, and you're saying collaboration internally is crucial. It helps in a way that if you structure people, let's say you're sitting here today, and tomorrow you have to sit somewhere else. You talk to somebody new, right? So does that happen? You're talking about collaboration. I want to ask, like Lab Campus, you are very focused on collaboration, right? You're talking about like collaboration is the key also for future, a future of work in a sense. Can you elaborate? Can you share with us an example on that?
Sure. I think collaboration is really the key, and it's not only internal, it's especially external. I mean, we are living in a world where technology changes are so rapidly coming, which is also a lot of risky today. So nobody can solve the challenges alone. So what we really need is something where people can come together to work together.
So the space that you have, Lab Campus, is just next to the Munich airport, right? So how does that bring collaboration? How do you guys intend or plan to bring that, help in that collaboration area?
Well, unfortunately, in today's world, we are less and less collaborating. I mean, if you look at the political world we have today, what's happening with US and China, what's happening with Brexit, so we are going the other way around that we should go. So what is required? We need to build up some kind of trust level, and the way we want to do it, we want to start it with small things. We need to start it with small connections, with small triggers, and build it up from there. We do not want to start with the big challenges because they are too big, but start small and get from there.
Yeah, we talk about collaboration all the time, right? We want to leave political stuff outside of the picture. A lot of businesses are not really that affected politically. So I know China, a lot of those big businesses, they are very state government-backed, right? So they have certain kind of agenda, with the recent trade war, etc. But I think collaboration in terms of, how our future workspace are designed in that sense, be it a physical space that allows people to collaborate internally, and also we talk about mobility in terms of work these days, that gives you the freedom to work in your client's office, something like that, right? So is that helpful? Is that the trend that's moving ahead? Does it bring in flexibility? It gives you freedom of time to manage your own time. Does it help in terms of for maybe direct this question to Lizzie here, Facebook. So your employees, they get the freedom, the mobility to work anywhere they want, right? Let's say, for example, do you think that would bring in more productivity?
Yeah, we do give employees freedom, but with great freedom comes great responsibility. So if you're a salesperson, you really should be in the neighborhood of your clients. It's not great if you're working for the New York office and your clients are in KL, right? So we balance everything out. I'm going to challenge you and say we need to keep the workplace separate from politics, because I think one of the things that we've seen recently as the world becomes more polarized is we used to talk about people wanting to feel a sense of engagement at work. And what we're really seeing now is we're seeing people want to feel a sense of belonging, and they want to feel safe. They want to be able to express themselves with a level of authenticity, and that's becoming harder as views are becoming more polarized. We need to create a safe space for people in order to do great work. So I was taught the opposite way about a level of personal connection and productivity to the way that we think about things at Facebook. So I grew up in the generation where you were very professional. Maria and I would do work together. If we did great work together, we would like each other. After we liked each other, when I left the company or she left the company, we would become personal friends. At Facebook, we flip that and say that we think you need deep personal connection in order to do great work. So the weirdest thing that happens, there's a few strange things that happens at Facebook, but one of the weirdest things that happens is when you join, your boss friends you on Facebook and starts following you on Instagram, which is the strangest feeling for a new hire. It's a little bit of editing that goes on of your profile.
Make sure that you're clean on your profile, huh?
Yeah, exactly. But I really think that what happens outside in the world plays out in the workplace, and I'm interested if anyone else has seen this desire for belonging, this desire for authenticity within the workplace creep into what's expected of us.
Yeah, I think it's still case, like we've done a lot of research and understanding that work is changing. There's new rules, new work. There's I think that aggressive need to innovate and grow to survive. That's really important to organizations today. But attracting the right people as well, it's difficult in retaining them. So creating the right space is really understanding the work that people are carrying out in those spaces. And what we're starting to see is a shift really from the old way of working where people used to work in the grey cubicles. It was like a sea of sameness. And now people really want to go to a space that's a destination. They want to get up in the morning and they don't want to say, oh my God, work sucks. I've got to get up. I've got to go to work. They want to go to a place that is meaningful to them, that they actually are getting something back. So how do we create spaces that are not just trend-led? So we'll see a lot of this, the trend towards the open plan, or places that resemble your coffee shop or your living room, but sometimes they're not functional. But how do we design for spaces that really help teams and individuals deliver? So creating a home for teams that actually enables them and empowers them to actually deliver and succeed in their roles every day. I think that's something that we really see, and making those spaces flexible, adaptable, giving them choice, control over how they work. I think that's really something that we see very strongly, and I think it's 90% of employees, they really want to be in a collaborative mode. They want to be working with others. They don't want to be, yes, it's great to work as individuals at certain points when you want to focus, but there's that moment where I think sharing, feeling like you're part of a community within your own team is actually really, really important. But you have those moments where you can go away and distill and think about the problems you're solving. So that is definitely something that's really important to employees, and 93% of leaders see this as well. So something is definitely changing around teamwork and actually how that impacts the individual as well.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it from a top down, right? What is if you compare an organization today, at least a lot of the organizations that probably you work with and we work with an organization of 20 years ago, the level of growth in terms of employees is totally different. So you might have 20 people one year, you might have 200 a year later. The objectives of the company are actually not as long term, but they're actually changing, right? So there is a lot of flexibility kind of in just if you think from a top down of what needs to happen in the company, and I think that needs to be reflected in terms of how the workplaces are designed as well. So there's on the one side is that pull where really the young generation, Generation C, Generation Y, I think they want to have workplaces that resemble something else than just an office. And on the other side, you have like the organization, almost the necessity from an organizational standpoint that you want to reach an end and have like that much dynamism in the company that you actually need to be more flexible.
Yeah, you want to add on, Lisa?
I was just going to say that because you mentioned home and you mentioned identity and purpose. The one word we found that teams who are massively performing and excelling and feel that sense of home and identity and belonging, they talk about family. It's the one word they use in common, whether they're from Indonesia, whether they're from Philippines, China, it doesn't matter. They describe their work friends and their space as family. So it just plays to what you're saying there.
So is that also because like we spend more time at work right now than, colleagues are all families, and, we actually spend lesser time at home with our families, don't we? Because of the mobility, the access to information. We're practically at work 24/7. I know China is that way. Southeast Asia is pretty much this way as well. So I think if we could share a little bit of that context in terms of how is that affecting the future, or designing the workplace of the future. We talk about not just the space, right? But we talk about our lives. How is it changing our lives for the younger generation, and for, when I say older generation, I mean like the contrast. And we're not saying that it's old, yeah. But what's the difference? The expectation differences, or how is it? Is it good or is it bad? Maybe.
I think it's neither good or bad. I think if I look at my really younger colleagues, and I'm definitely one of the older colleagues, the younger colleagues, they have a totally different mindset. So if they show up later in the morning because they had to go to the gym in the morning, I think that's totally natural for them.
Acceptable for practice?
Of course. If there was a meeting at 9 o'clock, then it probably wouldn't be acceptable. But other than that, I think that's totally fine because they get their work done, right? So at the end, we're much more output controlled than we ever been. I think the older generation can learn from that, and I think we have seen people adapt to that at quite a pace. Just back to your home thing, our favorite room is our kitchen. So we have an office, which is an old building in Munich, but we equipped it with a fairly decent kitchen.
You cook all the time?
We don't cook there all the time, but you would always see people sitting around there, and that's a different kind of a breakout room almost, right?
I think also employees are really searching for the employer that shares the same values as them, that when they're at work, that they know that their health and well-being is taken care of, that trust is there in how they work. And when you talk about being in the gym, they're going to make that up at another point. So if you have to trust as a leader that your employees are doing their roles, it's really important. But there is generational differences that we discuss as well outside, and there is the younger and the older. But I feel it's just the younger are more vocal. They have their opinions, and they're not afraid to state them. And I think we can learn. I will put my hand up as the older generation. We can learn from that. It took us a longer time to become more vocal. So I think that's really important as well in the cultures that we build in our spaces and how we enable that.
Mark?
Yeah, I think the work of the future will be more intense than it is today. So we can see, all the
longer working hours, like more intense, like longer work.
More intense. No, it's not only about working hours, but it's less breaks. We can see that with the digitization, the repetitive task, which you just do by routine, they will disappear. Automation, yeah, the routine task will disappear, and you have to be more and more into creative tasks. And I think this is a big challenge. So on the one side, we have to give the people the environment to cope with this, because this is not something a human being likes. A human being likes to have some kind of stable environment, so it will be less stable. So we have to design the environments in a way that still the people have the possibility to withdraw back, to get some rest. But on the other side, I think it's not only the question of the old and the poor, but it's also a question of human beings which can cope with these new environments and which cannot cope with this speed of environments. And we have
You're talking about the speed of coping and not...
and we have to take care of the people which are not able to come along with this increased speed, with this increased pressure that we will experience in work in the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, so in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see the next generation of workers, you know, like the millennials, being bulk of the workforce, right? So they're very accustomed to this kind of working speed, you know, the style of working. So maybe on that topic, Facebook or, you know, Lizzie and Christopher, you can share a little bit about like, okay, from the perspective of an employer, you know, like what are the things that, you know, these new job seekers, talents are looking for? And maybe from Christoph, you know, like when you look at doing your investments into like founders and startups, is that something that really affects, you know, like the founding team, or, you know, how does it change? Because if we're talking about cross-border businesses, we're coming up with ideas that's not just locally to solve problems, but it's global, right? So when you work with teams from different countries, how does that work? So maybe we start with Facebook first.
Yeah, I was going to go to your first point about what people are looking for. Is one of the things that I'm wanting to understand more at the moment is where the organization begins and ends, because there is such fluidity and transparency between what's personal, what's professional, but also what people expect from the organization. And there are some really funny, interesting counter trends. So for anyone who's got a financial responsibility in the audience, when we look at things like benefits provision, typically these have been outsourced over the years to the Philippines and India. Low-cost providers, it's seen as an overhead. But we know, because people are on all the time, they're on 24/7, they need more support, but they also expect more from an employer. We've actually flipped that and brought the benefits team back in-house. So we have a huge square footage in our Marina One residence. It's about 2,000 square feet. It's called our Life at desk. And for anyone who rents a property in Singapore, we know that 2,000 square feet is quite an expensive amount of real estate, right? And we have a desk where we have the Life at consultants can answer anything on pension, on maternity leave, on counselling and stress management, on financial assistance, and we have consultation rooms individually. And so we've taken that back onshore. And if you think about it, it's actually quite old-fashioned in many ways, because it's...
Yeah, it is. Do you think people spend more time on that, you know, like getting consultation than working? Yeah.
No, but we believe that it helps people do better work, right? When you take care of the whole person. But it's quite a funny old-fashioned way to look at things, which I think has kicked in again, and the validity of it applies now more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, we usually work with much smaller organizations than obviously a Facebook is. And I think they are still hopefully in their frugal stages. So they have a necessity to kind of be very careful with money. But compared to startups 10 years ago, I think most founding teams today start thinking about work issues and the sense of purpose and how they organize for work much earlier in the process of a company than they used to. I think probably in Europe...
Is this something that you would talk to when you assess?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Because I think you've seen in Europe, probably the Scandinavian countries are kind of where the leader in that. So usually a Swedish office is vacant by 5 p.m. Everybody leaves the office and has at least 3 hours of family time. So they usually have a meal together. Usually two incomes in a family. Usually 2 kids. The Swedish are very organized in that fashion. And then after 8 o'clock, they would come back, and not to the office, but probably would then spend another half hour doing emails and stuff. But they have a very clear separation still today, also in companies like Spotify, where you have a professional segment and then you have a private segment. Other countries do that different. So in Germany, I think people tend to stay at the office much longer, but then the curtain falls. And I think founders in different countries need to think about what is the local concept of having a good family and a good business life, and how's the balance strike between the two.
Yeah, because it's so difficult to keep a fine line between work and personal life, especially as we're more connected these days, right? So the future work aims to, do you think, companies or organizations these days, they are putting enough effort to emphasize this? Are they addressing this issue, or are they just, squeezing the amount of time they could get out of their employees?
I think I'm talking
From a
about
startup perspective?
of a difficult sample, because I'm dealing with young companies. For them, it's actually easy because they don't have to change, because they build up from scratch. I think probably the interesting question is, if you're a company 30, 40, 50, or maybe 100 years old, how do they go about that change? Not only in floor plans, but also in terms of the hierarchy, the organization, feedback loops, because feedback, obviously, flexibility comes only if there's a very organized and close
open
absolutely.
environment, right? So what about Lab Campus? It's relatively new that Lab Campus is coming up, but do you think that it's going to change?
Well, I see to the question before, I think a lot of companies adjusting to this challenge. I mean, that work and life are merging. So I think the flexibility from employers, I worked for Siemens, I worked for Carl Zeiss before, that you're able in normal working hours to do some phone calls or go somewhere to see a doctor, or go to get your child from kindergarten or something is there. And that's what we also try to do at Lab Campus. We want to build this space where you can do everything, let's say, from shopping, from seeing a doctor to having childcare, have it at one place to make it easy, because the boundaries are blurring. And I think the future, it will come also in the countries where this is still separated. It will come that the two lives are more and more blending.
Yeah, and we could see that. Sorry, Maria, I know you want to add something on there, right? So I have the next question for you as well related to this, because we're talking a lot about the global, maybe in Europe, but let's bring it back down to Southeast Asia a little bit. Maria, I know you're based in Hong Kong, and do you see that with your clients that you work with, do they take this into consideration in terms of the family and personal time and work time? Do they take it into consideration, or they try to build their office just like a home so that the employees don't go home?
I think working with leading organizations, I know that we understand that they do take this seriously globally, because it's costing billions, health and well-being, mental health, physical health. When you lose an employee to them being unwell, you have to replace them. So we have to think about that. We should value our people and take care of them. How the space works and is designed for people is really important, because we need to understand the modes of work and how we can encourage them not to be fixed to a screen all day. How can they get up and move? How can they actually rejuvenate during the day and encourage them? And it's about building those cultures, and how does space enable that? I think that's something we do see. I work in Hong Kong, that's where I'm based, but actually I'm based across Asia Pacific, so I get to see my eyes on various cultures, and that will be anything from Japan to India to China. I think my observations is Asia is very fast-paced. Some cultures even more so than others. If I look at India, I sometimes am aghast at basically how fast and the hours that they put into work. Because actually, yes, I think technology means that we're engaged all the time, but it's actually trying to strike that balance, which is difficult, because as we're innovating and striving to push to succeed, I think there has to be a top-down culture from the leaders to actually encourage the teams and the employees to strike that balance.
Okay, very, very interesting. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is we talk about the future of work in terms of the workplace of tomorrow. Everybody is out there. We can do we could pull out our laptop, our iPad here to do work. We don't have to go back to the office. What about security-wise? Security in terms for organization. When you work, outside of your office. In the past, we have like this intranet that we have to get on. You send your corporate emails within this internal email platform, so you don't get some sort of like leakages, right? So in terms of where we have more flexibility to work where we want to, you're connected to a different Wi-Fi in a Starbucks. How do we look at security in that sense? Any one of you here? In the future of work, how do we protect our security?
Well, I think that depends a little bit on the area you work in. I mean, if you look at it from an innovation perspective, from a business perspective, it's the role of traditional IP has changed. The role of patents has changed. I mean, nowadays it's about speed, it's about implementation of business models. And from this perspective, I mean, it's really about who's getting first, who's able to occupy the networks. Security in terms of IT is not that important anymore. So I would not see it, depending on the business, I would not see it that critical. For sure, if you're at BMW or if you have Airbus and you have some confidential construction plans of planes, that's different. But I think a lot of businesses, this topic gets less important.
Okay, all right. So security, not a big issue.
No, it is an issue, but there's been a lot is done, and I think this is okay.
Okay.
So a lot of the stuff is done. You still need to be careful. I mean, you need to be careful about phishing and so on. But this is not. I mean, with the stuff being done and the change in the importance of IP, I think that is handleable. That's not one of the key issues for me for the future of work.
Okay. Okay, that's very good. So. With that, I think I have this question here that I've been meaning to ask here. We're talking about the workplace of tomorrow, but we are actually constantly changing our environment, the way we work. What do you foresee in the next maybe 5 years? How would work, or the nature of work be? Maybe we start with Facebook.
We're very excited about AR, VR. So we have a big innovation business, Oculus. You put the headset on, we now don't need to be disconnected to the main, and where you can connect with anyone in any context. I think particularly for people who are differently abled, for people who are perhaps in really rural locations, able to connect immediately in real time with people from around the world, giving people access to different forms of education, enabling them to travel without moving. That's something that we're really excited by.
But travel without moving, like being there in a hologram or, in that way of communication, right? But we still need that physical connection, don't we? Do you agree on that?
Yes and no. We recently invested in a startup company in Canada that does telemedicine. And yes, I'd like to see, in an ideal world, I'd like to be in front of my doctor, who is the best doctor in the world. But if you're on Prince Edward Island, he's just not available, or he's available after 8 hours. So I'd rather get a diagnosis on something which is relatively benign within 30 minutes or something. Actually, they pick up after 5 or 10 minutes, and get that problem solved. Not just out of efficiency reasons, but also because of health reasons, right? So I think if bandwidth increases and the readiness of people to do things long distance, I think you now have the first people who do surgery basically over a distance of 11 time zones, and you can do that. So if you have a knee surgery, you probably want to have the best knee surgeon, I think he's in Vail, as I believe, to operate on you, and that can be done.
Do you think this is accessible to, like the mass population, or is this just available to people who can afford it?
Initially, like most products, probably it starts, that type of service probably starts from the top. The telemedicine startup in Canada I talked about is open to everybody.
Okay.
And it's affordable.
Oh, that sounds cool. Lizzie, you have something to add on, or? Okay, Maria?
I think it's two ways. I think the human factor is usually important. It's probably one of the reasons why people come to work, to connect, to share problems and solve them together. But technology is an underlay to how they do that, reaching out to other teams that may be distributed to help them also in the problem-solving process. I think also the gig economy and distributed teams is the way the future is at. Reaching to experts are not just within your physical reach, but actually they're a call away. They're a video conferencing call away. So I think it depends on your needs and what you want to actually be achieving and what task you're undergoing.
I think the future of work will be characterized by constant change. I mean, I said that the repetitive task will be overtaken by machines and robots. I mean, there's also, you call this permanent beta. I mean, you will never be in a stage when you're final. So the pressure increases on the people, on the employees. And I think what is required with the workplace, we need to provide them a space where they feel well, you know, where they can meet each other. I think still physical spaces where people can meet are really important, because otherwise the people will feel left alone. And what is also required is to have some kind of, we heard this morning, a purpose on top, because otherwise, pressure is getting too much. I mean, it will be a high pressure on the people in the future to cope with all this changing environment all the time.
I just want to add to that as well, like there's this constant fear that AI is going to take over everybody's job. It's like
it's ludicrous, or do you think it's actually
No, I think it's repetitive tasks for now. I think it's far out when it comes to taking over creative roles or solving complicated problems. I think that's where the human factor, and actually AI if in the room could not sense body language and feelings and have a facial recognition and sense of like how you're with your teammate, how you're working together, how you feel the stress together to solve the problem. So I think AI is maybe a while away before it can go there, but I do think it does have a role for work today.
supportive role?
Yes, for work today.
Yeah, I fully agree, but I would like to, from a human perspective, I mean, these are the repetitive tasks when you're used to relax a little bit. You know, these are the tasks when you do, I don't know, at 5 in the evening, 6 in the evening, after lunch, then you do some kind of email sorting. If this drops out, then you're left with the high demanding creative tasks, and I think this is really putting pressure higher on the people who have to work. But I agree, I mean, it's not completely changing everything, but it will be also the small things which will make a change.
Yeah, definitely technology aiding all those changes. I think Facebook is doing a lot on that, right? You know, in terms of how it's going to help workers or employees have a more work-life balance. Is that true?
Work-life balance. There's a PhD on that. Yeah, I would say work-life integration, but it's more around helping people build social value around what matters to them, and not just for employees, but for users as well. And I think that's going to be something that we're really focused on for the foreseeable future.
Okay, so I think we're almost down time. You know, like let's just go one round here. What is the core thing that identifies with you in terms of designing the future of the workplace? What is one thing, is it to you, that matters the most? Like maybe we start with Mark.
I think in the new world what is required is that you build, measure, learn. I mean, the startup approach, try something, if it's working, then go along. And you need to test. You need to understand what your customer wants, and this is something, a new style of work.
A new style of work, adapting. Okay. Steelcase, in terms of Steelcase, what do you think it's the core?
I think understanding the importance of place and knowing that place shapes behavior, and over time that behavior becomes culture.
Right. Christoph.
Well, if I think about the people who are entering the workspace today, I think what I would hope for is they find flexible workplaces, that they find something that they can work for which has a purpose. And I think the one thing that really scares me a bit about the outlook for the young generation is that they are 100% connected, but very lonely sometimes. And even a Facebook, I think, cannot really solve that issue. So if I hear that more and more, like in a lot of industrial and very successful countries, I think suicide rates go up. That is something that I wish, that's a riddle we can solve. And I think workplace, since it is a big part of our lives and also will be of our the lives of our kids, I think that's one of the things that I hope we find solutions to.
I think you're going to see a battle play out in Southeast Asia between the VCs funding the different startups and where the VC sits and what their philosophy is on work. I think you're going to see two very, very different types of organisation emerge, which are directly opposed to each other in terms of their values. So I think watch this space, particularly in Southeast Asia.
Okay, that's all we have for today. Thank you to our panel. Now it's lunch. Thank you.